We're live.
Hi. Hi, world.
Hi, everyone. And we are the Wattpad4, and we are super excited to be here with Gilded Cage author, Vicky.
She's kind of gilded.
You're so gilded.
And we are the Wattpad4, and we are super excited to be here. I hear myself. Hold on. Gilded Cage author.
You have the video up somewhere else, probably.
Yeah, I don't have it up.
You're so gilded.
Leah, is it you again? It's
No,
totally
it's
Leah.
not me this time. I just checked.
Hold on. Gilded Cage
You have the video up somewhere else, probably.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
Oh,
Yeah, is it you again? It's
no,
totally
it's
Leah.
not me this time. I just checked.
Somebody try muting yourself one at a time.
It's not me this time. I just checked.
Okay.
Vic, it might go.
Somebody try muting yourself one at a time.
Okay, I just needed. Is it me?
Vic, it might go. It's down to Monica or Vic.
Try muting yourself one at a time.
I'm hearing something that sounds like whale song.
I know.
Down to Monica or Vic.
I just muted myself. Hold on. There.
You're not muted.
Oh, I'm not muted. Sorry.
There's up at the top. There's a little microphone. You have to click on the slash
okay.
through the microphone button. There you go. Okay, it's Monica. I think
Did you fix it?
the rest of you
Yay!
that seemed to have fixed it. Okay. Oh,
Awesome.
this happened last time.
Now our guest is muted. There. Okay. Welcome, Vic.
Restart this.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so again, we are here with Gilded author Leah James. Hi, Victoria.
Restart this.
Okay, gosh. Okay, so again, we are here with Gilded author Leah James. Hi, Victoria.
Yeah, Monica, it's you. Okay, everyone except Monica unmute themselves.
I'm unmuted.
Everyone, Vic, you're still muted. Okay. No, Monica, you mute yourself for now.
Okay.
Sorry,
You're
Monica.
silencing her, Monica.
No, you be quiet.
Muted.
Unfortunately, I think it's
Kind of
No,
hijack.
Monica, you mute yourself for now. Oh, it's not Monica. Crap.
You're silencing her, Monica.
No, you be quiet. Unfortunately,
Kind of hijack.
Monica, you mute yourself for now. Oh, it's not Monica. Crap.
You're silencing her, Monica.
No, you be quiet.
Vic, I think it might be actually you. Do you have any windows open? Even your Twitter might be playing a video. Leah, only you and I get the floor here.
I
How's it
know.
going? How's it going? Hey,
I love your shirt. It's so cute.
thanks. I was just gonna say I love your hair. You're almost like a strawberry blonde, so we could be sisters.
I know that it was secretly
Only
my
you and I
plan.
get the floor here.
I know.
How's it going? Hey.
I love your shirt. It's
Yep. Yep. Vic, it's you. I was gonna say I love your hair. You're almost like strawberry blonde. Sisters.
I know that it was secretly my plan.
The floor here.
I know.
How's it going? Hey.
I love your shirt. It's
Yep. Yep. Vic, it's you. I was gonna say I love your hair. You're almost like strawberry blonde.
I'm really not hearing this very well. It is the
Yeah.
yeah.
like close everything on your internet except the chat window.
Try that and try again.
Yeah.
We've kicked her off.
Oh,
Vic is really
good. Wow.
Oh my god, I tweeted that we were having technical difficulties.
pretty sure everyone can figure that out.
I'm just going through the Twitter. Everybody's thank you guys for being patient with us. We, is anybody re-inviting Vic, or are we just kicking her out permanently?
No, I'm just making sure that it works.
Okay.
Okay, and I'm not hearing the echo again. So I think,
Okay.
okay. No, don't do that. Don't mess with me right now. Okay,
You've been told.
I think it was her. Okay, I'll re-invite her back, and then hopefully she will.
Let me know when we're ready.
Oh.
That's sassy, Rebecca.
What? Okay.
Oh, nice.
Sassy.
Okay, I re-invited her. Rebecca's like, I gotta finish the book. Quick.
I know, I'm only halfway. So let me warn you guys, if you give me any spoilers, I will be so mad.
I'll try not to.
Oh,
There we go.
Hi, Vic.
I swear I don't kick the author off every chat we have. I promise.
Liar.
It amuses me.
I'm here. Okay, so we're good. And once again, welcome, Vic. And say hi to everyone. They're all saying hello on Twitter. Okay, so I guess we will just get this started. We've been on for a little bit. Okay, Vic, so could you please tell us about yourself and how you started writing?
Yeah, goodness me. I wrote a really bad book about 10 years ago. I'd always wanted to be a writer. We had the book launch on Monday, so like a week ago here in London. My book.
Oh, I love that
Beautiful.
cover.
Mm-hmm.
But for that launch, my mother found something I had written when I was 7 years old, and I had sent it into the local library writing competition. So plainly, you know, from a young age, I was convinced that I had something that, you know, stories that I wanted to tell. It was, funnily enough, it was also a bit of magical realism. It involved a statue of a king coming to life and walking through my hometown. And he went in a bookshop, of course, as I would do, and he went in a cake shop, as I would do. So that was the beginning of my literary career, such as it was. Yeah, and then I didn't write anything for a very, very long time. But I was one of those people who loved reading. I did English at university. And, you know, I think for everyone who's an avid reader, you always kind of think, well, what book would I write? And then I was kind of in my sort of mid-20s and thought, I'll write that book. Except it was horrible. It was really, really horrible. It was a terrible, terrible science fiction book, kind of Victorian steampunk missionaries in space. I don't know what and it was so discouraging. I just thought, oh, obviously, you know, I'm not really any good at this after all. So I kind of threw myself into my day job, which I'm lucky it's TV. It's really interesting. I read a lot of fan fiction, and interestingly enough, it was kind of fan fiction that got me writing something for the first time. I did write a piece of fan fiction, which will remain forever.
No, you have to read it. You have to read it.
You shouldn't have told us this if you want it to remain secret.
This is now our quest. We will.
Harry Potter fan fiction.
Yes.
That doesn't get any better.
Amazing.
It was Harry Potter fan fiction, but it was trying to be a sort of Austen-style romantic comedy Harry Potter fan fiction.
Oh wow! I need to know everything.
But you know, it was the first thing I'd written that I wasn't like totally ashamed of. I was like, actually, this isn't bad. You know, what a shame it is. Somebody else's world, somebody else's characters, and somebody else's voice. But hey. Yeah, and then, you know, but it kind of sort of it got me back writing again. And I sort of started a couple of other projects, and then it was while I was making a TV series called The Super Rich and Us, when I sort of had this idea. You know, I mean, like I was filming with billionaires, as you do. I was, you know, sort of also. So some of these guys are really fascinating. There's absolutely fascinating. And the one thing they all had in common was this belief that that they could, make stuff happen. Because of their money, they could make stuff happen. And I just kind of went home one day and I was like, that's like magic. These guys see themselves as almost having magic, And in this world, actually, money is a bit like magic, and the rest of us just have to kind of scrape on and get by. And I just thought, that's a book, that's a story right there, and I want to write that. I want to write a book that is our world now, that has this, this interesting narrative about money, about power, and then has magic on top of it, because I firmly believe that everything is better with magic. So
absolutely.
That was that. Yeah, sorry, that was a really long answer, but we had to cover like about 3 decades of my non-existent writing career. So thank you for bearing with that.
So I guess that leads us into our second question, which was what inspired Gilded Cage. And I guess just it's such a rich world, and I know you mentioned that it was based on the show that you were working on. So I guess could you just go a little bit more into how you went about building that world?
Yeah, I mean, the inspiration came as a version of our world now. So I always knew that I wanted it to be recognizably Britain, and to be within a bigger world, recognizably the US, France, Russia, China. It was super important that people feel that that this is something they could recognize. So I came up with the idea of sort of the 10 years of the slave days. If on the one hand we've got magic, which is kind of taking like this real life power of money and kind of pushing it to one extreme, then on the other extreme I took all this sort of rubbish stuff that everybody has to deal with these days, like young people who, sort of are paying a fortune for education, getting in debt, can't find a rewarding job. The rest of us who just kind of accept it as normal. I mean, certainly in the UK, we accept it as normal that for like 30 years, you can't really take a risk on your job. You might not be able to do what you want. You have to play it safe because you've got this debt, this mortgage. So I, just sort of like everything that is kind of relatably worst about life today. I kind of rolled all of that together and sort of put it in this concept of the slave days, which in the book is 10 years that everybody has to give as service to the aristocrats. So once I had those sort of 2 big ideas, common people, this kind of indentured service, and the super rich with magic, the rest of it, because it's recognizable, I thought, this will be quite easy. I won't have to I won't have to work too hard at the world building. But of course you do, because once you bring magic into it, everything changes. So history changes. And I had to kind of take the history back 400 years to the English Civil War. Interestingly enough, random English historical fact, today is the martyrdom day of Charles I, our king who was beheaded in the English Civil War. And his death is our divergent point for the world of the book. So I basically had to go back, reinvent history. I've had such fun reinventing history in book 2 as well. Got a bit of Napoleon in there going on in the background. So yeah, I thought I was just going to like cut and paste like the world, but sadly it was a bit harder than that.
It showed just like all that work because the world is so rich. And I love the way that you had all the different point of views, so it gave you like just a different view of everything going on, and it's just phenomenal that you carried like 7 point of views, right? That was amazing.
Yeah, and they're very realistically done. Like you really feel a different voice. Like you wouldn't need to know the name of the character. You can just sense who it is. That's what I kind of felt was really fantastic. And even the worlds, like you just get sucked into what the world is like as of an aristocrat or of somebody, working in their slave days. It was pretty cool. I was impressed How did you keep track of all that?
That was literally one of my questions.
What's your writing process like? Because I can imagine just keeping track of like all the characters and where they are, and yeah. So
I mean, I kind of sort of know what they're all doing. It's interesting if, you know, if there's one kind of lesson I've learned, sometimes people say to you, you know, so what have you learned from writing book 1 and book 2? In book 2, the kind of like the handover from one character to the next is much tighter. You know, we go, the time frame of book 2 is shorter. Book 1, it spans more than half a year. So I'm really happy to hear you say that they, you know, they kind of, that it hangs together as a story, because it is quite a lot to ask. I mean, Gilded Cage it's sort of being put on the shelf as an adult book, but you know, my publishers feel that it's kind of got YA appeal. You know, obviously the lead characters are teenagers, so Luke and Abby and Cillian are all teenagers. And I know that obviously in YA writing, you know, you normally have either just sort of first person, or you'll have like an Ember in the Ashes, which I really love. That's like alternating, you know, sort of 2 first person perspectives. So I was kind of worried that people might freak out at you know, at the sheer number of points of view in the book. But there's really, you know, I mean, there's kind of like a key 3 people. There's the commoner brother and sister, Luke and Abby, and then there is Cillian Jardine, who is the youngest of the aristocrats. Now, as the book's been going out for first readers, I've been getting lots of comments saying, I really liked Cillian, why is there not more of him in the book? And you know, the reason for that is that obviously he is, you know, trying to figure out what the heck Cillian is up to is sort of one of the puzzles and one of the pleasures of the book. So I had to kind of ration him in book 1, and then we get more of him in book 2, and then you know, I'm not going to let him own book 3 because that wouldn't be fair, but you know, he he gets plenty of airtime. So, you know, trying to work out whose bit of the story we hear next, and I really wanted to make sure that we got into the world of the aristocrats as well. You know, I think with YA we are so used to kind of seeing the world through the eyes of the good guys. I love having fun with the bad guys. And the other thing I wanted to do is just to, you know, to really kind of explore this idea of, you know, this isn't a good and evil, this isn't a sort of baddies and goodies, this isn't, you know, magical aristocrats and everybody else. You know, there are shades of grey kind of running through all of the characters. So that was something I really wanted to explore. So, phew, I mean, by and large, people seem to think like, yeah, the multiple perspectives work, but it's hard work. It's hard work kind of holding them all together.
I can't even imagine how you kept track of everybody while you were writing them. Like, I would have a Dexter wall of Post-it notes a mile long and probably
But you still did it in a way that, like, when you guys were talking about, oh, there's so many different points of view, I'm like, oh yeah, I guess there was. Like, I was so sucked in and engaged by the actual plot and the characters that I never stopped to go like, man, there's a lot of different things, or there's a lot of different people. I was just go, you know? So obviously you've done a really great job.
And when you sat down to write, did you just go based on whichever character was speaking to you at the time, or you knew that you were going to focus on that specific character and that part of the story?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the way I approached it was I knew the story, because again, this is sort of something that when people sort of pick it up at the beginning of the book, you think you've got 2 separate stories. You think you've got Luke, the brother who is sent off to the slave town, and then you've got Abigail and the rest of the family who are sent off to the aristocratic estate. So you start off thinking, hey, here's 2 completely different paths, but actually, as I think becomes kind of increasingly obvious, there's a single, it all comes together at the end. So effectively it is one single plot. so really, it just became a question, you know. I mean, there were certain sort of set pieces where obviously it has to be told from the perspective of one person or another, and Luke is the only person we are with in Millmore Slave Town. But really, it just, you know, when I came to a sort of a point in the plot, I would think, you know, what do we need to know here? Whose perspective on this will be most interesting? You know, whether it is a decision that gets made in Parliament, or you know, an escape, a breakout that happens in the slave town. You know, whose eyes will be the most interesting to see that through. And actually, one of the characters who I most enjoy writing, but who I think at first you sort of think, oh, hang on a minute, you know, is this guy actually in the middle of all of this? Why are we looking at it through his eyes? Is Gavar Jardine, who is the heir of the aristocratic family. Gavar's a bit of a bastard, which is probably why I have great fun writing him. He's, you know, he's really not a nice piece of work in so many ways. And yet there's something about him, you know, he sees through the bullshit of the rest of his elite world. And I had an absolute blast writing him, and I also thought that was a really important perspective that we needed to see. It stops the aristocrats just being this kind of monolithic bunch of really powerful, really nasty people. So yeah, that was kind of how I did it. You know, certain big moments where you just know whose eyes you have to see it through, and then other sort of moments where the plot sort of unspools and there's various people whose eyes you could look through. And on all of those, I just thought, who do I really want to see this with?
Sorry, my computer's dying. Okay, I was really curious about that when I was reading it, because everything was so seamless, and I was wondering, like, were there chapters that were somebody else's point of view, but then you decided like you would cut them and use someone else? So yeah.
That's interesting. That's a really interesting question, because obviously it started off as a first draft on Wattpad. And in that, so that was kind of like the raw material that I started off with. And in that, I think I was still kind of feeling my way towards, you know, who my main voices were. Okay. So there was one chapter in that actually deals with a lot of plot that now has been pushed into book 2. So that one's gone. And then there was another chapter that was actually from the point of view of Daisy, who is the third Hadley child. Yeah, and I really like Daisy. But the thing that I kind of realized was that, you know, she's 10, you know, she's 10, she's 11. So she was not having, you know, she just didn't have the kind of the sophisticated insight that it's the chapter where Daisy and Abby meet Cillian in the woods. And yeah, so in the final version, we see that through Abby's eyes. Because I just realized that there was too much going on in that scene. You know, a 10-year-old, no matter how smart, would not be able to make the kind of connections that I needed us to take away from that encounter. So that chapter, the major events in it remain the same, but the viewpoint, the person we see it with, changes. So yeah, so there was that. Book two has been interesting. Book 2 has been interesting again. It's in that I'd initially thought of having a prologue from someone who was a very minor character in book 1. And I quite liked that. I thought, oh, that will be fun, you know, a different voice. But then by the time I reached the book, I was like, no, hang on a minute. You know, book 1 ends on such a cliffhanger. You want to know what's happening to Luke.
Don't tell me. Don't tell me.
Spoilers.
So I was like, crikey, you know, I've got to pick up where book 1 leaves off. You can't do that to people when you leave so much up in the air at the end of a book, you have to. I think you have an obligation to get straight back in with it.
Yeah, that ending was amazing. And no spoilers for Rebecca, but it was really good.
It was really good.
Vic, can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Vic, did you find it difficult writing the book, not posting it on Wattpad as you wrote? Because you did that for the first one. Was it like a big difference in your writing, how you approached it for book 2?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's kind of yes and no, in that, I mean, what I always got from Wattpad was just, you know, that kind of sort of love and support from readers. You know, I wasn't using Wattpad as a critique platform. And the reason I found Wattpad in the first place was because, like I said, the idea came to me when I was making this TV program, and you know, I was literally working stupid hours. You know, I mean, television when you're in production, it's super intense, and I just thought, if I don't start getting this story down, I will lose it. You know, this inspiration will just kind of disappear under the mountain of all of this work that I have to do. So that was kind of how I found my way to Wattpad. I just thought, this is great. It's a bit like, you know, going to Weight Watchers and getting on the scales every week. You know, it's a way of kind of tracking progress and keeping yourself accountable. So that was sort of what I went on Wattpad for originally. Obviously, then I found a whole bunch of awesome people and awesome stories, which was great. But that was, you know, the intention in my head. And then when it came to writing book 2, I was making 2 more TV programs. I made one in the first half of last year about the Brexit referendum, and then the second half of last year I was making a program about the US elections. So I had even less time than when I was writing book 1. So what I ended up doing was basically shutting myself away for about sort of 6 weeks, and I would wake up, I would sit down at my computer where I am now, and I would write, and then I would go to bed, and I would do that sort of 7 days a week, sort of for 6 weeks, and I got my first draft, and then I did the same again at the end of the year when I'd finished the second program. So it almost couldn't be more different from how I wrote book 1. You know, book 1, I was turning up for my day job, and I was getting to know everybody on Wattpad, and I was sort of getting all of these comments and feedback. And then for book 2, like, it was just me. There were days when I didn't speak to another human being, you know, like the highlight of my day would be going to the supermarket for a pint of milk. It was really, really tragic, you know. The glamorous writing life, I mean, it's lies. It's all lies.
Before I forget, we have quite a few people in the comments asking, how exactly do you pronounce, well, they're wondering about most of the names in your book.
Oh my God, you know what? There's a section in the book at the beginning where I try to kind of to put in some of the pronunciations. So when Abby is talking to Daisy, because I thought, some of these names are weird. People are going to want to know how they're pronounced. And then you start looking at the reviews of your books, and people are sort of saying, oh yeah, there was this really obvious bit at the beginning where the author told you how all the names are pronounced, and I thought that was really patronizing. So it's like, I can't win. I can pronounce every name for you.
One of our questions on Twitter is asking you to pronounce all the names in your lovely accent.
Oh my God.
You want the British version.
Yeah.
All of the names. Well, so I guess it's mainly the aristocrats that are causing the problem. So we have Gavar, Jenna, Cillian. Then we have mother and father, who are Lord Witham and Lady Thalia. And then we have Aunt Euterpe. So Thalia and Euterpe, they take their names from the muses, the muse of lyric poetry and the muse of dance. But, you know, sometimes authors get it wrong, because it is actually technically possible to get one of your characters' names wrong. Because I went along to the audiobook recording, And that was just amazing. Like the audiobook, if anybody watching this is remotely interested in audiobooks, try this one because it really is amazing. I got the actress I wanted, and like the range of voices she has to do. Anybody who's met the character who appears at the end of chapter 3, she had to do that voice. I mean, she slays it. It's amazing. But there's also a producer who coordinates the whole audiobook recording, and part of their job is to be really sort of anal and to look up all of the pronunciations and, you know, all of that. And in this case, this guy had looked up a character whose name I was pronouncing Hypatia. And he said, how's this one pronounced? And I was like, oh, it's Hypatia. And he kind of looked slightly aghast and he said, surely it should be Hypatia. And I was like, that's like, so
wouldn't you just be like, I'm the author, so no.
Yeah, I made the name.
I just thought Hypatia sounded so much more badass than Hypatia. So I was like, okay, fine. Fine, Hypatia. So yeah, any other weird name? Oh, Mylia. Yes, I guess sort of Mylia. He's a idealistic minor young aristocrat. But that's I tried, so for Mylia, Cillian, I tried, and Buddha and Bodina, the two sisters, I wanted a little flavor of like ancient British names. So obviously Buddha is named for Boudica, and it's all the, you know, kind of warrior queen. I mean, Buddha is not a nice young woman, but you know, she's got a lot of ambition, she's got a lot of strength, she wants to be a ruler. I felt she deserved a really good name, although she's a pretty nasty piece of work.
See, she was one of my favorite characters, and I just love that you.
I love it when people tell me they like Buddha.
I know she's not a nice person necessarily, but she's fascinating as a character. I love characters like that, and seeing through their eyes. I just find it really compelling and fascinating. Keeps me turning pages.
You see, to me, it was so important that we see somebody like Buddha. You know, I mean, I find morally complicated characters so much more interesting than straightforward ones. And so Buddha and Gavar, that's why they've kind of, you know, like they've earned their chapters, because what's really interesting about both of them is that they are quite oblivious to large parts of their own nature. And I've had enormous fun in book 2, which does keep the same point of view characters. So we've got like the 5 main point of views: Luke, Abby, Cillian, who gets more chapters, and also Gavar and Buddha. And those 2 in particular have this quite sort of interesting journey towards kind of greater self-awareness. Doesn't necessarily mean they're becoming nicer people.
And so I guess, I mean, Gilded Cage is one of them, but what achievements are you most proud of?
Oh my God, look. I mean, this is my book that I wrote. You know?
It's very cool to see that you're so excited about it still.
No, I mean, it's actually this. Let me show you something. This is actually not my book. This is somebody else's book.
What?
Because they sent me the dust jackets to approve.
Oh,
the book itself is still in the hands of UPS. So I'm waiting for UPS to get their act together. And to send me my book. But it's weird. It's this kind of publication process has sort of happened backwards because of the UK and the US publication dates. So it was published in ebook in December in the UK to kind of catch people reading over the Christmas holidays. And then it came out in paperback over here on Thursday. There's not going to be a hardback in the UK because that's not how our book market works. In the US, it's completely the opposite. If something doesn't go into hardback first, it's not seen as being, you know, kind of serious in some stores, you know, like they want to see a nice fat hardback book. So yeah, so the last edition of my book is the hardback, which you know, I'm sort of used to thinking of as being kind of the first one to appear. So it's kind of, oh god, yeah, and something really exciting. Like the book's gone into lots of countries, lots of translations. I guess actually maybe that's something I'm really, really proud of, because it's an English book. It's very English. I use English advisedly rather than British, because there's a lot of, you know, it will kind of go back to sort of almost Arthurian. It goes back to Civil War. We do spend a lot of time in Scotland in book 2. That's not a spoiler.
I was going to say spoiler.
But it's, you know, it's such a kind of English feeling book, and I knew it would obviously resonate with readers in the UK. Obviously, sort of English aristocrats, that is a kind of story that readers in the United States and in Canada are, you know, they're quite sort of familiar with that sort of image of the UK. But it's gone, you know, we've got translations in Russia, you know, Brazil, Bulgaria, Turkey. I mean, just like really unexpected places, which is, it just kind of does my mind. And I got my first international cover a couple of days ago, the French one, and I looked at that, and it's got a different title, and it's got this really strong strap line, and I was like, oh my god, oh, French people are going to be reading my book. Yeah, so that's kind of like a magic moment.
That is amazing.
I can't wait to get one like with script that I can't read. Like, I can't wait to see the Russian one. Anything where I haven't even got the faintest idea what they call it.
What is that?
It's going to be so cool.
And then I guess this is the last of our questions before we start taking your questions, and it's, what can readers expect from you next? Any projects that you're excited about?
Sorry, what's next?
What can readers expect from you next?
Well, book 3. Book 3, and then yeah, you know, I mean, then I've got some ideas kind of knocking around. I mean, the way it seems to work, it's been so interesting for me, because I came to this whole process kind of completely clueless about publishing. You know, I didn't have any friends in the industry. You know, I've never been part of you know, all these kind of amazing like online kind of networks of people who are also working on novels and getting agents and things like that. It kind of, when it happened to me, it happened sort of almost by accident. You know, it's just by chance that this idea came to me and I wrote it. So my understanding of the publishing industry is like teeny tiny. And I'm kind of learning as I go. And one of the things that I've learned is you know, that point at which your agent starts saying, Vic, what are you doing next? So that point has just happened. I had a little chat with my agent at the start of the year about sort of ideas that I have kind of circulating, and we'll probably go. My editors have options on first look at what I come up with next. I'm quite lucky. Because these are in this nice sort of space, so they're kind of adult, but they're also kind of YA, they're fantasy, but they're also kind of contemporary. So I've got a bit of room, because, you know, the one thing I've learned is that it's about sort of establishing yourself as a writer who writes certain types of books. So you want to be producing something that will appeal to, you know, I'm not suddenly going to start writing kind of contemporary romance. I'm not suddenly going to start writing, you know, sort of high fantasy with, you know, sort of elves and dwarves. this is the kind of book that I love to write. And of my ideas, I definitely have sort of contemporary settings, speculative twists, alternate history. Those are the things I get really excited about. So hopefully, depending on sort of what my editors like the look of, that's what the next ones will be.
I know no clues, no is it sci-fi, fantasy?
Hints. We want some hints.
I can't say more because I literally, and this, as I say, this is what's been so interesting for me, just kind of learning how it all works. So, my understanding of what happens next is that, I will outline. What I can say is that what I would like to do is I have in my head definitely a standalone that I would like to be the next book. That is another kind of alternate reality, contemporary. No magic in that one, but definitely with a sort of speculative twist. So that's what I'd like to do next. And then after that, I'm going to keep my mouth zipped, but I do always loved science fiction. I've never felt that I'm sort of very good about writing spaceships and hyperdrives and there's too many words that you have to invent and it's all just quite exhausting. But I do love, I love books that have those, sort of like alien contact, other kind of civilizations. Again, I think, Worlds with Aliens work a lot like Worlds with Magic in that they give you something that is recognizable but kind of with a twist. So, I'm not ruling out something science fiction-y, maybe. But in the same way that this is not kind of high fantasy and, it's not detailed spell casting. If I were to do something science fiction-y, it would be sort of less sciencey and more fiction-y.
I like that as a tagline, less sciencey and more fictionary.
Right underneath the title.
Oh,
there have been some amazing science fiction books out there lately that have just kind of, I don't know, maybe I'm the only science fiction geek on this particular conversation now.
Oh no.
But something like A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. If anyone's not read that, go read it. It's amazing, and it's it's kind of like a sort of buddy story in space. And yes, there is all this kind of cool science that you feel is there and is really realistic if you need it. But it's an amazing book about kind of friendship and adventure, and it's definitely more fictiony and less sciencey. So yay for that.
What did you say it's called? A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet?
Yeah, A Long Way
Great
to
title.
a Small, isn't it brilliant? It's absolutely brilliant. And the book is as good as the title.
Okay, so we're going to dive into some viewer questions. I'm going to start off with the ones that left their questions during the week, and then we'll go to some of the ones live. First off, Sarah Benson wants to know, what was the most difficult part of editing Gilded Cage, and what's your favorite part of the story?
Was that the most difficult part of editing it?
Yes.
Yeah, most difficult part. I mean, it was kind of the book on which I had to learn how to edit. So I went into the edits on book 2 kind of much more fearless. In that like I said, with book 2, I literally kind of wrote a first draft and then scrapped the entire thing and wrote it again, wrote a second 100,000 words kind of from scratch. Whereas with Gilded Cage, I kind of didn't quite have the confidence to do that. But I think in many ways it's easier to simply start over. So I gave myself a more difficult edit process on book 1. Yeah. Other than that, I mean, it's trying to see it with fresh eyes always is difficult, and this is where the edit letter really helped. I'm very lucky, like my UK and my US editors work together, and they send me one edit letter that says, you know, these are our thoughts about your book. So that's sort of really fantastic. You know, I hear kind of horror stories of authors who have sort of separate editors, and, you know, like the editor in the US wants them to do this with their book, and the editor in the UK wants them to do something different with the book, and, you know, they end up doing half of one, half of the other, and everybody's miserable, you know. But no, an edit letter is a fantastic help, and was a great kind of route map through my first time through that experience. So, you know, I adore my editors, and they're very talented. So that was that. In terms of what was the most fun bit to write, anything involving Cillian is always enormous fun. The ending of chapter 3 is possibly one of my favorite lines in the book. I loved writing the ending, although it was a real bastard, because you've got so much, you know, so much has to come together, and it has to work, it has to be believable, you have to do that thing of, you know, pointing the reader back through your story and saying, that thing that somebody did back in chapter 12, you know, this is the payoff. And you have to do that with so much, you know, it's where you are kind of knotting all of that together. So that was really, really tough, but I loved doing it. I loved doing it. There's nothing better than kind of sort of looking back and thinking, you know, I tied it up. And then just in terms of the most kind of writerly experience, I love chapter 10, which is the chapter that we spend with a character we only hear from that once, who is Euterpe Parva, who has been sleeping in a kind of magical coma for 25 years. And with that chapter, I deliberately wanted to do something different. I wanted it to have a kind of a dream-like feel. You know, I was able to be sort of slightly more lyrical, slightly more poetical. You know, I like quite clean and easy to understand prose. I think when you're telling a complicated story, you can't drip too many metaphors, too much imagery onto that. But for that kind of one chapter, I just gave myself a little bit more poetic license, because I wanted it to feel like sort of almost a story from another world, which in a way it is. So I really loved writing that one.
Awesome. And next we have a question from Monica Gaba, and she wants to know, who was your favorite character to write, and can you describe your book in 3 words?
Describe it in 3 words, my God. Dark, smart, and delicious.
Sounds like an attractive man.
Or chocolate, I was thinking. Okay, except for the yes.
But it's not, you know, I mean, I look at the blurbs on the back of the book, and it's like dark magic, deliciously dark and intriguing. So I guess it's kind of dark.
Sensing a theme here.
Yeah. Okay, so that was that one, and then the other question is, who is my favorite character to write? You know, it is funny, isn't it? I mean, you know, sort of as I've said, I always have great fun with Cillian, kind of coming up with the one-liners. I love Gavar's. Of all of the characters that I didn't expect to love writing, Gavar is kind of the one who surprised me the most. You know, I totally adore Luke. He is such a good soul with a good heart, and you know, it's a pleasure to spend time with him. He is trying to think rightly, he's trying to grow up, and he's trying to be the best person he can be. So obviously, I love him. Abby shares sort of many qualities with me. In some ways, she's a lot less likable than her brother. You know, she tends to overthink things. And possibly is actually not the most sympathetic character in book 1, but is someone I sort of feel quite close to. Kind of the same goes for Buddha. You know, I always knew that sort of Buddha's viewpoint was a way of exploring somebody kind of very unlike me. But the one character, like I say, who I was not expecting to fall in love with, but did, is Gabba. I'd initially thought he'd be almost a kind of, not like Relief, but he would be a kind of change of pace, you know, he would be sort of obnoxious, but quite distinctive. And then the more time I spent with him, kind of the better I got to know him. So, and I think with him, that process of self-discovery across the 3 books is, I love it. I'm loving writing it. Yeah. So that was my, you know, this is the weird thing. You're making all of these people up, and yet they surprise you. If you're being true to them, I think, you know, you that probably sounds a bit pretentious.
No, we're all nodding like, yeah.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah, you know them. It's in the same way that you can know a person for 5 years, 10 years. You know, you can have a friend who will surprise you with like their political opinions, or, you know, changing their life in some way. You know, like quitting their job and reinventing themselves. And I think it's, you know, when your characters do that to you, you have to trust them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the most like beautiful parts of the process. Is when they first come to you, you just kind of look at them and it's like, oh, there's the bad boy. But then once you start writing them and they open themselves up to you, you just fall in love with the characters. I think that's one of the best parts about writing. And I love
I think that's one of the reasons that I don't plot as like strictly as I did before. So, because the character will react in some unexpected way, and I'm like, well, there's that plot outline out the door. So, just go with it.
Exactly. And next we have a question from George Harrow, and he says, is there any method you use to differentiate between the characters' different voices?
Good question.
Yeah, that's a super interesting question, isn't it? It's, in some ways I'm helped with the world of the book in that we obviously have, you know, the commoners and the aristocrats, so that gives me kind of different linguistic registers. But I wouldn't say there's a technique. No, there's not a technique. In fact, one of the things that I had to do in editing book 1, Rini, who is this kind of scrappy little kid who has lived in the slave town, we don't know exactly how long for, but she's a kind of sort of artful dodger type kid. We don't know who her parents are. And with her, I did want to have a kind of a different speech pattern. But the thing you realise is that something looks much more visible on the page than it does in your head. So at first I was, you know, sort of writing Rini with quite a kind of strong accent. And then you look at it on the page and it just looks really heavy-handed, you know, and it almost kind of sort of marks her off from the other characters. And I really didn't want to do that. So that was a process in the edit, just sort of really toning that down. I think when it comes to giving characters accents and things like that, you know, sort of less is more. A couple of readers from the north of England have kind of tweeted me when they've spotted like a northern dialect word in there, and they're like, oh my God, I love this word, you know, I can't believe you put it in your book. And that makes me really happy, you know, like there's sort of overlooked vocabulary that of course it's lovely to get out there and use that. But I think restraint is really kind of the key. And what sort of delivers authentic speech and dialogue is just understanding your characters, is knowing your characters, you know. So to me, they are real, living, breathing people. You know, when I go for a walk, I talk to them. You know, I listen to them. Their voices are familiar to me in the same way that the voices of my friends are familiar to me. You know, when I watch a film and I think, I wonder what my friend X would think of that film, in the same way, you know, I could do that process for my characters. When you know them kind of so intimately, then in a way, sort of won't worry about how to write the voices, because it won't be you writing, it will be your characters talking to you.
Okay. All right, wonderful. And let's see. Okay, so we have any questions over on the chat? These were the Twitter questions.
Okay, yeah, we do have a few. One in particular I'm quite interested in hearing the answer to as well. I think it was Deb who asked if the marketing in the US versus the UK, if you found it quite different, and if so, what type of differences are there?
Yeah, now that's very interesting. I mean, marketing is a bit of a dark art. I mean, it's not something that the author is part of. I mean, I'm very lucky, you know, both of my publishers kind of presented to me, if you like, kind of their sort of campaign ideas, you know, how they were going to sort of reach out to potential kind of readership groups. It feels like it's got a bit more of a kind of a YA presentation in the US. I think that may be sort of due to the fact that the bookstores over there, most of them will have this kind of fantastic and sort of very prominent sort of YA section, you know, that is seen as being a kind of a hot category right now. So it's very visible in bookstores, which would probably sort of explain that. I mean, the thing I loved about, I mean, I was in the fortunate position of being able to pick the publisher offer that I went with in both the US and the UK. We had auctions, and as part of that process, you know, so even at that very early stage, the publishers were sort of sending me and my agent, you know, kind of documents saying, well, this is who we think would read this book, and this is how we will share it with them. And what I wanted to hear and what my agent wanted to hear were basically publishers saying, we think everybody will love this book, but we've got some sensible ideas about how to make sure that it reaches out to a really sort of broad group of people. So yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of how it's been done. I mean, for me, it's a learning process. I mean, we're only, you know, this one has been on shelves for a week. This one isn't even on shelves yet, you know, so there's a whole load more yet to come. I mean, the kind of the social media thing is very interesting. I mean, I was really grateful to my US publishers for being willing to take on a UK-based writer. I was like, is this going to be a problem? You know, I won't be able to go do author events for you so easily. You know, we'll have this time gap. And they were like, no, look, you know, social media presence, you know, blogs, your website, Twitter, it's basically just being there. It's just being there. You know, you could be living in some really rural bit of the United States, and you would be kind of as inaccessible physically as you are in London. So I thought that was very interesting as well. You know, the physical presence kind of matters a lot less than I had initially thought.
Do you have any other questions on the chat here?
We do. Pull this up again. So we're coming up on an hour, so I don't know if we'll get to everyone's questions, but we'll try to get as many as we can here.
I'll do this really quickly. Let's do a quick fire.
Britt likes your marketing as a dark art quote. So Leah asks, what is the best piece of writing advice you've ever received?
Oh, yes. And actually, I promised to answer that one on Twitter. So this kind of changed my life. For real, it changed my life. I was at a London Book Fair kind of author event. This was a year before I started writing Gilded Cage. And at a panel event, all of the authors were asked this question. And a lovely woman named Antonia Honeywell, who has written a very interesting book called The Ship, which is again a kind of sort of post-apocalyptic Britain. He said, give yourself permission to take your writing seriously. And I thought that was fascinating, because it wasn't, she didn't say, take your writing seriously. She said, give yourself permission to take your writing seriously. And I think that permission thing is so, so important, because, you know, we are all so busy with work, family, you know, other halves, just all of the daily pressures of life. And it's very easy to kind of think, when you have this dream of seeing your book on a shelf one day, to think that's kind of self-indulgent, or, you know, everybody has that dream, or it's unrealistic, or it's arrogant, or, you know, there are so many reasons we can tell ourselves not to take our writing seriously, that actually giving yourself permission to do that is hugely important. And for me, it actually helped me change the way I work. I left a full-time job and I went freelance, because I thought that in between those gaps I would write. That was a long answer, not a short one. Sorry.
We'll maybe squeeze one more in. We have one from Shay Taylor, and he asked, what was it like going against certain tropes?
What was it like, what?
Going against certain tropes.
Sorry, that was garbled. I didn't get that.
Certain tropes, like, yeah.
YA tropes, I guess.
Like,
yeah, that's interesting.
Story stereotypes, yeah.
Yeah, I guess what sort of as in the kind of having multiple POVs rather than first person, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting, you know, because I just sort of wrote the book I wanted to write, and I didn't think about how it fitted into a certain category. And I think this is really important, you know. I mean, I think often writers kind of feel, oh, such and such a type of book is hot right now, and they try and sort of modify their story to make it fit what's hot. And you know, I think we all know that's really not a good idea, because A, what's hot will have moved on by the time your book has kind of gone through being written, finding an agent, being auctioned, finding a publisher, hitting the shelves. But also you won't be true to the story that you want to write. So, you know, while I was writing this, I did occasionally sort of freak out a bit about the fact that I was worried that it fell between YA and adult. So if you like, I worried that it wasn't tropey enough. But I just kind of trusted it. I just thought, you know, this is the book that I want to write, and actually I'm not a professional in the industry. You know, if anybody wants to buy it, if a publisher wants to buy it, they will have their own idea of sort of where it sits and if they think it needs to be changed. And actually it's changed remarkably little. So I got lucky. I got some amazing editors.
Okay, so I guess, wow, it's 9:03, so our hour is up. Thank you so much, Vic, for being with us, and congratulations. We are so proud of you. You're such an inspiration.
We gotta give her a shout out, because it's 2 o'clock in the morning for her.
Oh, yes. What a trooper.
Yeah. I wish I looked that good at 2 o'clock in the morning.
I'm telling you, when you're doing your copy edits, you know, like there is no day or night.
There is no
day. No, when I was writing book 2, it was the same. It was just, you know, you would just, you know, we've all done this, haven't we? Come on, ladies. You just write what has to be written, and then you kind of, you go to sleep, and then you just deal with that thing called daytime, you know, later. That's
like an hour later after you go to bed. That's when you deal with daytime.
Yeah. Plus, this was full of coffee when we started talking. It's empty now. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for
Absolutely.
coming.
And everyone stay tuned, because next week we're going to be letting our viewers choose our topics for February. So that should be fun. Same time, same place, Monday, 8 o'clock, and we will see you guys then.
Bye,
Good night.
everybody.